المونديال هو 14 شباط مرة أخرى.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. Egyptian Judge Adli Mansour vows to uphold the values of the revolution as he is sworn in as the country's interim president. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas expresses concern over Lebanon's stability and security following meetings with Lebanese officials. And Syria's fractious opposition coalition meets in Istanbul under pressure to name a new leader. Egyptian Judge Adli Mansour vows to uphold the values of the revolution as he is sworn in as Egypt's interim president. This comes hours after his democratically elected predecessor, Mohamed Morsi, was overthrown in a military coup following huge protests against his one-year rule. Mansour will become head of state under an army transition plan. President Mohamed Morsi was overthrown on Wednesday by the armed forces for failing to listen to mass protest demands to share power. The army detailed a roadmap for a return to democratic rule, including the appointment of the interim ruler. Mansour will become head of state under an army transition plan. Sources say Morsi is held in an unspecified military barracks along with senior aides. Hundreds of Muslim Brotherhood officials were also reported to have been arrested, with many senior leaders being held in the Tora prison in Cairo. The United Arab Emirates has praised the Egyptian army for ousting President Mohamed Morsi, whose Muslim Brotherhood movement is the target of a crackdown in the oil-rich Gulf state. Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan said the UAE is confident that the people of Egypt are capable of overcoming these difficult moments and moving towards a secure and flourishing future, adding that the UAE was seeking a strengthening of ties with Egypt. For its part, Russia has called on all of Egypt's political forces to exercise restraint and refrain from violence. China backed this call and said it supported the choice of the Egyptian people and called for dialogue. Syria's Muslim Brotherhood have criticized the military coup in Egypt after the army ousted President Mohamed Morsi. Speaking from Turkey, the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood's deputy head, Farouk Tayfur, has urged the Egyptian army to return to its barracks. For its part, the European Union has called for a rapid return to democracy in Egypt. EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton said that she hoped Egypt's new administration will be fully inclusive. She stressed the importance of ensuring full respect for fundamental rights and the rule of law, and said she will hold the authorities to account. She condemned all violent acts and urged the security forces to do everything in their power to protect the lives and well-beings of Egyptian citizens. The United States, another world power, however, declined to condemn Morsi's removal as a military coup. Israel has also maintained a worried silence following the coup. Government officials, who are normally quick to comment on regional developments, largely maintained an unusual silence after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered his cabinet not to comment on the crisis. Britain joined many other countries around the world in not condemning the ousting of Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi as a military coup. British Foreign Secretary William Hague says it is a huge problem that the Egyptian military intervention sets a precedent for future governments.
And in our view, there are now three very important things. One is that there is a swift return to democratic processes. He has assured me there will be early presidential elections, and I have made the point that we regard it, and many other countries will regard it as important, that those elections are totally free and fair, that everyone is able to compete in them. And that means the early release of political leaders and journalists who have been arrested so that they can take part in those elections. Human rights must be upheld and restored. The second thing that needs to happen in our view is that Egypt's political leaders find the way to work together in a way they haven't over the last year, to agree a constitution, an electoral law, the checks and balances of a democratic system that respects minorities as well as majority government, so that everyone can have confidence, the Egyptians can have confidence in the future, in their political future. And the third thing, in our view, is that the interim government and a new civilian government take urgent economic steps. Egypt is a country of 85 million people with immense economic challenges. One of the things that hasn't been achieved over the last year is sufficient decisiveness and action to improve their economic situation.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has met with Speaker Nabih Berri at Ain Tine and said he was concerned over the country's stability and security. Following talks at the Grand Serai with Prime Minister Najib Mikati earlier today, Abbas stressed that the Palestinian authorities does not meddle in the affairs of Arab countries, including those of Lebanon. He said the refugee camps are in no need of weapons because they are protected by the Lebanese government and people. Abbas said his government was open to whatever decision is taken to control the arms in the Palestinian refugee camps. The Palestinian president arrived in Lebanon on Wednesday on a 3-day visit, where he is set to meet with a number of senior officials. Following talks with President Michel Sleiman at Babda Palace, Abbas said he stresses on dissociating Palestinians from Lebanon's internal conflicts. The Future Parliamentary Bloc's Executive Bureau has held a meeting at late Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri's Majdalyoun residence. MP Bahia al-Hariri briefed conferees on the prevailing situation in the city of Sidon following last week's clashes between Lebanese army and Salafist cleric Sheikh Ahmed Lassir. A statement issued after the meeting said the Future Bloc reiterates its unrelenting support to the Lebanese army, especially in its endeavors preserving national security and safeguarding national peace in all Lebanese regions with no exception. It added, any assault targeting the Lebanese army is an attack against the entire nation, with the Future Bloc at the forefront. Furthermore, the conferees voiced their support to Future Movement leader Saad Hariri's most recent stances, in which he condemned Hezbollah's involvement in the Syrian conflict. Around 30 suspects detained last month during the Lebanese army's battle with Salafist gunmen have been handed over to the country's military prosecutor. A judicial source said that military prosecutor Judge Sa'ir will study the case and then file charges against whoever is thought to be involved in the Abra confrontation. Sa'ir ordered on Monday the release of 9 people who had been arrested at the end of the battles. 30 suspects remain in custody. At least 18 soldiers and 28 of Salafist cleric Sheikh Ahmed Lassir's gunmen were killed in the June gun battles, which broke out after Lassir's fighters attacked a Lebanese army checkpoint in Abra near Sidon in south of Lebanon. Future Bloc MP Ahmed Fatfaz has criticized Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri for acting like a partisan official and voiced support for the controversial move of restoring retired police chief Ashraf Rifi to his former post. Fatfat told reporters that Berri proved to be a party in all the conflicts that are taking place in the country, and he is not an equal distance from all the political parties. Fatfat also said Hezbollah was the root of the problem in Lebanon and has accused the movement of involvement in the crackdown the Lebanese army launched against militant Salafist Sheikh Ahmed Lassir in Abra. On another note, Fatfat said that retired police chief Major General Ashraf Rifi must return to his post because he is an important security presence. Rifi retired from the police force in March and took up a career in politics based out of his home city of Tripoli. Fatfat added the Future Movement is convinced that Rifi's return is an urgent security and political need. The Joint Parliamentary Committees has convened to discuss the new wage scale for public employees after President Michel Sleiman signed the decree in mid-June. Deputy Speaker Farid Makari headed the meeting, which was held in presence of caretaker Finance Minister Mohammed Al-Safadi. The committees decided to task Change and Reform Bloc MP Ibrahim Kanaan with forming a committee to study the decree. In a televised statement on OTV channel, Kanaan said he urged everyone to cooperate to resolve the file of the wages. He added he will set dates for the committee's consecutive meetings. Sleiman's signature took time after advisors found accounting mistakes in the scale and returned the draft law to Al-Safadi to amend it. It was endorsed by the government in March following weeks of protests across Lebanon. Syrian warplanes have bombed the central city of Homs, with insurgents and troops battling on the ground as regime forces pressed an assault on rebel-held neighborhoods. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said warplanes carried out 2 raids against the Khaldiye neighborhood of Homs, and both Khaldiye and the old city were under heavy rocket fire, producing the sound of explosions and plumes of smoke. The watchdog added sporadic clashes were ongoing between rebels and regime forces on the outskirts of Khaldiye. Regime forces on Saturday began a campaign to retake several rebel-held neighborhoods of Homs, often dubbed the capital of the uprising against President Bashar al-Assad. The neighborhoods being targeted have been under siege by regime troops for more than a year, and many civilians have fled, but concerns have been raised about those who remain. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon expressed fears for 2,500 civilians trapped in the city. Ban called on the warring sides to do their utmost to avoid civilian casualties and to allow immediate humanitarian access. Syria's fractious opposition coalition have met in the Turkish city of Istanbul under pressure to name a new leader and prove to its Western and Arab backers it can be trusted with advanced weapons to beat back a concerted offensive by President Bashar al-Assad. The opposition's inability to unite has made Western countries reluctant to send weapons, even as Assad's forces have seized initiative in recent months, and Washington and its European allies have vowed to aid his enemies. The Syrian National Coalition has been without a leader for months after its head quit over disagreement about potential talks with Assad's government. It aims to agree on a new unified leadership at its talks in Istanbul. Coming up next, ex-trader Kerviel is rebuffed by the Paris Employment Tribunal. Stay with us for more. Welcome back, and now we move on with news around the world in brief. South Korea has offered to hold talks with North Korea aimed at reopening a jointly run factory park near the armed border between the two countries. South Korea reiterated that the Kaesong Industrial Park problems should be solved by dialogue between the South and the North Korean authorities. The offer comes amid pressure from owners of small and medium businesses of the Kaesong Industrial Zone that are incurring losses. The European Parliament has voted to approve the entry of Latvia into the Eurozone, endorsing the country as the 18th country to adopt the Euro starting January of 2014. The European Parliament determined that Latvia has met all the requirements for joining the Eurozone. An official statement said it was an important milestone for Latvia, and Latvians are going to benefit a lot from the entry. Rescue operations continued in Indonesia's Sumatra as the earthquake death toll rose to 30. The 6.2 magnitude tremor struck the northern strip of Indonesia's Sumatra Island on Tuesday. Officials say 2 people are missing and more than 200 have been injured. Electricity supplies are slowly returning to normal in the quake's hit zone, but communication is still patchy. Former Société Générale trader Jérôme Kerviel, who was sentenced to 3 years in jail in order to pay his former employer 4.9 billion euros, has arrived at an employment tribunal, which will rule on whether his employer was right to fire him. Kerviel is seeking to escape conviction and a jail sentence upheld by an appeals court in October over 4.9 billion euros in losses that French bank Société Générale said were the result of unauthorized trades by Kerviel. He has always said he was innocent and that the bank was aware of what he was doing. Kerviel also said he was seeking 4.9 billion euros in damages from his former employer and hoped this new proceedings would include an accounting and financial expertise. But the court, after a short hearing, rejected his plea for a new expert inquiry to help overturn his dismissal in France's largest trading scandal in 2008. The court set a new hearing date to March of 2014. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now let me remind you of our headlines. Egyptian Judge Adli Mansour vows to uphold the values of the revolution as he is sworn in as the country's interim president. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas expresses concern over Lebanon's stability and security following meetings with Lebanese officials. And finally, Syria's fractious opposition coalition meets in Istanbul under pressure to name a new leader. Those were your 4th of July headlines from Future Television, live from Beirut. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a great evening ahead. For those of you watching us in the United States, enjoy the fireworks.
ريال هو 14 شباط مرة أخرى.